Fraud lawsuits, magic keyholing bullets, some shitball customer service, and the potential uncovery of a vast but niche ammo manufacturer conspiracy. Gather around, my sons, for today we're taking a look at one of the weirdest American-made AKs around, the Lancaster Arms AK-74. What is up, guys? My name is John with PewPewTactical.com, your definitive source for gun reviews, gear guides, and all things that go... I believe I've mentioned before that I'm a bit of an AK dork, and I have a soft spot for AK-74s specifically. They're pretty cool. And while companies like PSA have done a pretty bang-up job of putting out an American-made AK in 7.62x39 that actually works really well, in the early to mid-aughts, finding an American-made AK-74 was not a walk in the park. Realistically, for the AK enthusiast dead set on snagging an iteration of the younger Kalashnikov platform, your options were likely going to be limited to the well-regarded but pricey Arsenal SLR line of AK-74s, the kind of toss-up Century Arms AK-74s that many in Ancient Gun Forum contend are likely fitted with a Bulgarian 5.56 AK barrel that causes them to keyhole like crazy when firing an actual 5.45 round, or alternatively, a small company operating out of Arizona known as Lancaster Arms, and offered a bevy of milled and stamped AK-47 and 74 variants for a price that was pretty damn hard to beat at about $600 or so, with the particular Rough Rider model that we've got here being blown out by Atlantic Firearms around 2009 for an absurd $479. While Lancaster's reputation would go on to absolutely tank down the road, early reviews of their AK-74s were actually pretty positive, and about the worst thing that anyone had to say about them was the fact that the turnaround time, if you purchase directly from Lancaster, could be pretty up there, but that's territory that you get into with small builders kind of across the board, so However, the deal would prove to be too good to be true, and as of 2010, it appears a collection of spurned Lancaster customers started the blog LancasterArmsSucks.com, detailing a variety of increasingly absurd customer service nightmare scenarios wherein customers were sent total lemons, continually given excuses as to why the gun they'd sent back to take advantage of Lancaster's lifetime warranty still hadn't shipped after months of waiting, or even a few allegations of Lancaster Rough Rider AKs being so flawed that they were consistently beating themselves apart or outright exploding before seeing 1,000 rounds fired through them. Lancaster would go on to face a ton of legal hurdles that would ultimately see Arizona's Attorney General order Lancaster CEO one Chet Durda, whose only web presence appears to be a Twitter account in which he claims to be an ex-international arms dealer turned movie actor, and whose only tweet is some shit your grandma would click on before having her identity stolen, to pay close to $70,000 in restitution to customers that Lancaster screwed over before finally closing their doors for good. Although if the comments on the aforementioned blog are to be believed, Chet defaulted on that settlement too. So where does all of that leave us? Why, with an opportunity to get our hands on one of these AK-74 shaped potential hand grenades, of course, a close friend of ours was able to snag one of the Rough Rider 74s secondhand, and after he double-checked the serial number against the problematic serial number list that Lancaster themselves recalled before they went out of business and found that this rifle wasn't within the problematic serial range, he decided to go through with it. We actually took this 74 out to the desert about a year ago when we were working on the Romanian RPK video that we did a while back, and although we intended to get some trigger time in on both of them, alas, it was not to be. As soon as we attempted to chamber around, we hit our first snag, as the WPA Polyformance WPA Hollow Points that my friend brought out to the desert simply would not chamber. They'd get almost all the way there, but something about the round was preventing the bolt from being fully in battery, and obviously that's a potentially dangerous situation. You don't want to play around with that, especially with this gun's reputation, so once we had successfully cleared the gun, which involved pointing it in a safe direction and kicking the bolt because that's about how much force we needed to actually eject those malshapen rounds, whatever was going on, we just put it away for the day because it's not something you want to play around with in the desert. It's a little bit above our teching ability for something that we can do on site, and yikes. So we've got a rifle from a manufacturer that has been noted to have a slew of issues, and one of those potential issues is that a lot of the Rough Rider 74s were apparently overgassed to the extent that they were beating themselves out of correct head spacing. Could that be our issue? Alas, the gun was taken to a local AK tech who noted that the head spacing was actually pretty close to perfect, although he did wind up swapping out the recoil spring for a bit stiffer, heavier one, just to help mitigate that over-gassing issue. So now we're essentially back to square one, in that the issue we thought the AK was experiencing is not actually the issue. So we looked at the ammo next. Could we have potentially gotten a bad batch of 5.45? Let's find out. While we really had to dig to find anything useful, we were able to compile a ton of anecdotal evidence that other 74 owners, Lancasters in particular, were noting some pretty incredible malfunctions specifically using Wolf 55 grain hollow points. So rather than drop any more cash on another variant of somewhat uncommon 5.45 ammo, we managed to snag an inert 5.45 7 and 6 round, and it chambered just fine. The mystery deeper. Here is where we had a bit of an aha moment. When compared side by side, the inert 7 and 6 was way differently shaped than the Wolf hollow points that wouldn't feed. Like, really, look at these two rounds. How are they both considered 5.45? Now that we've managed to get some pretty solid clues as to what's going on here, we snagged some domestic surplus 7 and 6, as well as some Tula 60 grain FMJ 5.45. And lo and behold, they're about the same size and shape, and they chamber just fine. So what is going on with the Wolf hollow point ammo? In all honesty, this one's still pretty up in the air, but there are a few things to note. Originally, we had thought that perhaps this particular box of ammo was a fluke, as the size and shape of the Wolf hollow point almost looks like a 223 projectile, and given that some early stateside AK-74 builders were alleged to have used 5.56 barrels in their 74s, we began concocting some kind of conspiracy corkboard about the possibility that these specific rounds were somehow an attempt to mitigate the absurd, keyhole-inducing inaccuracy that comes from firing 5.45 out of a 5.56 barrel by inserting a 5.56 projectile into a 5.45 casing. It is admittedly pretty out there. However, if 2020 hasn't broken your brain to the point that you jump to conspiratorial thinking at the drop of a hat, don't worry. You'll get there. While there's definitely a certain type of allure that might come from feeling like you've uncovered some sort of weird ammo manufacturer skullduggery, there's, in all likelihood, probably a much more simple answer that actually revolves around how the 5.45 operates to begin with. A cross-section of 7 and 6 found online reveals that just behind the round's penetrator, you've got an open pocket of air that, combined with a lead plug crimped into the base of the bullet, shifts the bullet's center of gravity to the rear. This induces a higher chance of the round yawing when it strikes a solid surface, causing the bullet to deform and tumble as it travels through flesh, which generally speaking is going to create more complex tissue damage that stands a much higher chance of taking an enemy combatant out of the fight than a simple flesh wound would. Coincidentally, this is what is often cited as the reason that the 5.45 round has been dubbed the poison bullet. In a pop culture sense, folks generally seem to be kind of aware that the round tumbles, but the exact point of the tumbling seems to be kind of a point of contention. And as mentioned, because some of those early AK-74s were built on 5.56 Bulgarian barrels, they were absolute keyhole machines. And I suspect that probably a non-zero amount of people have internalized this as the 5.45 round having some kind of magic-ass physics-breaking property whereby it begins tumbling like a punted football straight out of the barrel. Which, no, that's... In any case, it appears as though Wolf's 5.45 hollow points have chosen to ditch that pocket of air entirely, resulting in a shortened projectile that appears to cause a shit ton of problems in a variety of rifles unable to chamber it. This isn't conclusive by any means, but it's the best we can come up with after going on a bit of a wild goose chase of hunting down information on decade-old defunct AK-centric forums. And it probably makes at least a little bit more sense than Wolf, Barnaul, and Tula jamming 223 bullets in a 5.45 casing and calling it a day. And at last, the rifle is functional. So I'm gonna talk about that now. But the entire ordeal with figuring out what was going on with the 5.45 was too strange not to share. I'm gonna try and put this into words as best as possible, and again, it comes with the caveat that I'm real into AKs, but even an absolute beater AK-74 like this one is just a downright blast to shoot. A normal 7.62x39 AK is fun, don't get me wrong, but there's just something about maybe the controllability of 5.45 that I really enjoy. For all intents and purposes, it feels a lot like an AR disguised as an AK, which obviously makes a ton of sense considering that 5.45 was an answer to NATO's speedy 5.56 round. From front to back, you've got the iconic AK-74 muzzle brake up front, which features 3 venting holes on the top and sides to mitigate muzzle climb, and 2 enormous chambers up front, which reduce recoil. This thing does its job pretty damn well, and no doubt is a huge contributing factor for why shooting an AK-74 is so fun. You can probably see pretty well from our footage here, but that barrel barely moves at all. You've also likely noticed my very cool gear by this point as well, graciously loaned to me by the same friend that owns the 74, and I can now confidently say that mid-90s era Uzbek border guard assault vest thing I'm wearing is absolutely the worst piece of kit I've ever used. But, you know, kinda in the same sense that a really bad movie is really good. It's like that. Moving on, we've got some rad plum furniture on the rifle, itself with a bit of a mysterious history behind it. Not gonna spend a ton of time here, but I find it interesting that no one's entirely positive why exactly the Soviets used plum instead of black. Some folks seem to think that the black dyes were either commercially unavailable or cost prohibitive to the Soviets during the time frame, which might be true. Others theorize that plum was chosen intentionally as a way to break up the rifle's silhouette through very early night vision technology. You get the idea. Regardless, it is a pretty neat detail. The entire gun is built on a Nodak Spud NDS-2 receiver, which is itself based on the Bulgarian SLR-105 pattern AK-74s that I believe Arsenal either used to or still is importing. The receiver features your typical AK dovetail rail, to which we've mounted an Obzor collimator sight. The Obzor is pretty rad, and I believe is currently issued to Russian big army units as the 1P63. Essentially, it uses ambient illumination to provide you with a T-style crosshair with a triangular reticle, requiring no batteries or electronics to operate. Additionally, in low-light situations, the reticle changes to a more simplistic T that appears inside the space where the normal reticle sits, powered entirely by tritium. It's also got a contrast filter that's accessed via a small throw lever on the side of the optic itself, which moves a small shade into place and makes the reticle more visible in very bright conditions. It is a bit of a non-standard approach, and a very Russian way to go about things. Rather than making an optic that is just bright normally, you include a feature that turns down the brightness of the world around you. We sort of struggled to figure out the windage and elevation adjustments, as none of us really speak technically oriented Russian, but once we got the optic zeroed, it actually works really well. I didn't feel quite as fast with it as I do with something like an EOTech in terms of target acquisition, likely just because I'm not super used to that sort of chin weld style aiming you need to get used to when you're using an AK with an optic mounted that high up. But once I got the hang of it, nailing our 2 or 250 yard steel with a 1X sight was easy, repeatable, and fun. Lancaster's Rough Rider AKs appear to have come stock with a slightly upgraded Tapco G2 trigger, and it's honestly pretty damn decent. You've got a very small amount of take-up and then a 3 to 4 pound break that happens almost immediately. It'll honestly catch you a bit off guard if you're not reasonably familiar with AKs, but once you're in the zone, it feels smooth. In all honesty, it's a bit of a bummer that Lancaster Arms went down the way that they did, as I actually had a ton of fun with their AK-74 during the time that I spent with it. And this is likely a sterling example of a Lancaster build in their earlier days when, quality control was still a consideration, which is a pretty terrifying sentence if you're an arms manufacturer. While it seems like a ton of people just had an absolute nightmare of a time dealing with Mr. Durda and all of his shenanigans, I can't imagine how stoked I would be if I managed to snag something that runs as well as this rifle does, ticks all of these military surplus nerd boxes for me, for sub $500. That's pretty absurd. Although I suspect many more Rough Rider Lancaster AK owners probably had a little bit of the buyer's remorse. While we primarily wanted to showcase the Lancaster Arms AK-74 and its supremely weird history as a fun storytelling exercise, I assume at least some of you are wondering if it's worth picking one up if given the chance. And honestly, we're not really going to make a call on that one way or the other. But if you do, just be prepared to do an absolutely hellish deep dive through a bunch of internet forum graveyards to figure out exactly what you might be in for. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Once again, my name is John with Pew Pew Tactical. We will see you next time.